Hey guys, what's going on? My name's Dr. Frank, and in today's brief video, I want to take some time and talk about counting your sobriety days. So I'm a month sober, I'm a year sober, I'm 4 days sober, because I think depending on the person and where you are in your sobriety process, this can either be a really good idea or a really bad idea, especially if you're struggling with relapse or lapses in your sobriety process. Whether you're quitting smoking weed, drinking alcohol, quitting nicotine, this is going to apply to you. If you're new to the channel, I'm the founder of AddictionMindset recovery coaching programs, which focus on helping people quit nicotine, THC, energy drinks, and adult media content, addictions that I once personally struggled with. So I think scenario one, where counting your sobriety days could be a benefit, would be the person who, one, likes statistics. They like numbers. They like keeping track of things. They're an organized person, and this just fits into their lifestyle, right? You can download an app like I Am Sober, the Grounded app for quitting weed, or the Quit Vaping app for quitting vaping. And this person's able to log on every morning and see, good, I got another day sober. And this can definitely help with the 1 day at a time approach. And I think it provides you a certain level of accountability. Oh, I've made it this far. I don't want to mess this up because I've made it this far. And I think that's a really good thing. Now, also positive about counting your sobriety days, I think, is the aspect, especially early on when you're quitting. Like if you're quitting smoking weed, it's not uncommon around the 2-week mark and then again at the 3-month mark to struggle a little bit, just randomly out of nowhere. And I think, I remember times in the past when I would wake up around day like 14 or 17 and I'd be getting some of those post-acute withdrawal symptoms, and I'd say, oh my God, I feel like crap. I'd look at my app telling me that I've been sober for 17 days, and I'd say, oh, right, I'm at the 2-week mark. This makes sense. I've heard in other videos, other timeline videos, that around 2 weeks, people usually struggle again. So in that sense, knowing my sobriety days and how long I've been sober was actually super beneficial, because it would give me realistic expectations for the time frame that I was in. And you'd see you get to 90 days, 120 days, and you'd say, okay, I can expect to be seeing some really good progress. It also can provide you with a benchmark. So if you've struggled to get to 30 days before, now this time around your goal is to beat 30 days. If you've struggled to get to 3 days, now you know this time around your goal is to try and aim for 5 days. So I think it can also be a really good way of setting up benchmark goals that you're trying to achieve, 1 year, 2 years, 10 years, whatever it may be. And you can structure little celebrations for yourself if you want around those dates. Now, that's where this would be a positive, right? And a lot of these apps, I'll throw this out there, they also offer a sense of community, other people for you to interact with who are also getting sober. Now, on the negative side of this, though, because there is a negative, I think what happened, and this is what would occur with me, is I would quit for a period of time, and I'd see I got 30 days sober, and then I would relapse. And I would be devastated. I'd be like, oh my God, how am I ever going to get to 30 days again? Or after I relapsed after a year quitting nicotine, right? I was like, oh my God, I got a year and some days and I just relapsed. How am I ever going to get to a year again? And it would actually become incredibly discouraging for me, looking at all the time I had accumulated not using a substance. And then that would just play into a lot of guilt. I guess you could say shame. It wasn't really shame. It was more just guilt and remorse and regret and anger and just feeling stupid and whatever. And that would cause me to relapse. So when I finally quit, and mind you, I'm not a numbers person. I'm not a super organized person. I said, okay, this time around, I'm going to do it differently. I'm just going to quit, and I'm not going to count the days that I've been sober, because I'm done with nicotine, I'm done with weed, I'm done with, whatever, energy drinks, and I'm not picking these things up ever again. I'm done with them. And the fact that I'm done forever, I don't think there's any need for me to count my days in sobriety, because I'm done. I made that decision, and I don't need to know how long I've been sober, because I'm going to be sober for the foreseeable future from those substances. And that mindset for me worked much better. People often ask me, Frank, how long has it been since you quit? And I always say right now it's 5 years, a little over 5 years at this point. And they're like, oh, don't you know the exact date? And it's like, no, I don't, because going back 5 years ago, I told myself I wasn't going to smoke weed ever again, and that worked for me. I was opposite the kind of one day at a time approach. And everyone is different. However you're doing it, whatever's working for you, keep doing that. This is just an idea or a thought for people who maybe they have been counting days and it hasn't been working for them. This is just an alternative option. That's all this is. Not saying any of this is right or wrong or the correct way or the wrong way. So for me, that turned out to work much better. And now what I talk about a lot in my programs with people when we coach them one-on-one, or now in our group settings, which you guys can check out in the pinned comment below if you want to be a part of our group community, I talk a lot about just picking a sobriety date, but not necessarily counting the days. So I quit smoking weed today on 6/15/2022. That's the last time I smoked. And yes, in theory, you could count, now you're a year later and it's your year anniversary. You could still count days, but I think you're better off just picking a date, memorizing the date that you quit, and then just going from there without counting it down day by day, day in and day out, each individualized day. That's what I tell people if they want to keep track of it. And I'll tell you guys something fascinating, actually. When I talk to people who have quit smoking cigarettes, quit smoking weed, and they're long-term into it, it's amazing the amount of people that I come across that don't actually know when they quit. They're like, oh, I quit somewhere in my 40s. I quit somewhere in my 20s. And I think there's a reason for that, because the moment they made that decision with these individuals, they started to identify as a non-weed smoker, a non-drinker, a non-nicotine user, right? And they were done with it. And their life moved on. Even though I think sobriety is awesome and getting sober is a huge accomplishment and something that you should celebrate, right? My whole channel is about it. For me, believe it or not, a lot of my life does not revolve around me actually being sober. A majority of my life revolves around my businesses, my hobbies, my marriage. I just don't think about quitting very often because weed and nicotine and that stuff, it has no place in my life anymore. So that would be my advice to people who have been continually relapsing and having a lot of trouble getting sober. Maybe stop counting the days and just quit. Don't make a bigger thing of it than it has to, because quitting an addiction is either going to be as big or as small of a deal as we allow it to be made. And I think for some people, making less of a big deal of it, not counting the days, just quitting and moving on with their lives is actually really, really beneficial. Now, moving on might be complicated. You might have a lot of trauma and stuff like that you got to work on going forward, but that doesn't have to be connected to addiction, and it doesn't have to be part of your progress that you're making in sobriety, in my opinion, okay? And on the flip side, if you haven't been counting days and that hasn't been working for you, well, maybe it's time you now download an app like the Grounded app or the Quit Vaping app or the I Am Sober app. Maybe counting days is exactly what you need to be doing, right? We try and find what's worked before, what hasn't worked before. If it didn't work before, I'm not going to repeat that mistake again. If it is working, well, damn, I'm going to keep doing it. So if you're counting your days, don't worry about it. Don't stop counting them. And if you're not counting days, well, I don't know, maybe that's a good thing for you. Don't feel like you have to. All right, guys, I hope this video helps. It was kind of just a tangent rant that I came up with last minute here. So if you need one-on-one coaching or you want to explore these ideas more, get into our Addiction Mindset community group, extremely affordable, or book a one-on-one session, which is going to cost a little bit more money, but totally worth your time. All right, I'll see you guys in the pinned comment below.